I'm Mike Bishop. I'm an anesthesiologist and also the chairperson of the licensing committee for the California Medical Board.
Excuse me, Dr. Bishop. Okay. I haven't transferred you into the main conference yet.
Oh.
He's actually here.
Well, I'm just saying there's two people in a separate conference right now. Do you want me to transfer you in there with them? No, Tom. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Come on.
Are we good to go? I'm fairly much a neophyte at being the boss person, so bear with me today. Okay, absolutely. Okay. Okay, so we're good then? All right, great. With me today, I have Ms. Kimberly Kirchmeyer, Executive Director, right here. We have Ms. Carrie Webb, Senior Legal Counsel, here, and Mr. Kurt Warden, Chief of Licensing, to my left. We are here today to discuss the possibility of changing the minimum postgraduate training requirements and for licensure in California, and in addition, any requirements we might add regarding physician reentry to practice after a long term of non-practice. I want to ask all of us to please turn our cell phones to silent. I will do that on my own as we speak, and make sure that they are off the table so that we can avoid feedback noise. This meeting is being webcast and will be available via teleconference. Individuals listening to the meeting will have an opportunity to provide public comment and will be assisted by a moderator who will be facilitating the teleconferencing process. For those members of the public participating via teleconference, please wait until the moderator has introduced you before you make your comments. To request to make a comment during the public comment period, press *1. You will hear a tone indicating you're in the queue for comment. If you change your mind and do not want to make a comment, please press the # sign. Mea culpa. All right. Very good. Assistance is available throughout the teleconference meeting. To request a specialist, press *0. As this is an interested parties meeting, we are here to hear from you. We encourage each of you to provide your insight into the issues. In order to have an accurate accounting of the meeting, I would like to have all speakers complete a presenter slip so I can call you by name at the appropriate time, and that the record of this meeting can be full and complete. Please give the speaker slips to Ms. Archer. Ms. Archer, can identify yourself? I want to remind all speakers to please stay on topic today. We plan to end today no later than 5 p.m. I will start off the meeting with the overview and discussion of the minimum requirements for board-recognized accredited training. The material for the postgraduate training discussion is on the website, and we have copies available here. I will ask Mr. Warden to provide some background information on what is currently required, what the requirements are for other states, and what the Federation of State Medical Boards recommends. Mr. Warden?
Okay, so in California, we recognize, for the Medical Board of California, we recognize two types of accredited postgraduate training: the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education and the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada for the training that's done in Canada.
Can we just take a 5-minute break? I just want to make sure that the callers on the phone can actually hear. Dawn, this is Elizabeth.
Ma'am.
Okay, we just want to make sure that the callers can hear the conference.
Yeah, you're in the main conference now.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Those are the two types of accredited postgraduate training that we recognize here at the Medical Board of California. The minimum requirements for postgraduate training to qualify for licensure in California is 1 successful year of completion of an ACGME or the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons accredited GME for a U.S. or Canadian medical school graduate. And for international medical school graduates, it's 2 years of successful completion of the same type of postgraduate training. Currently, California has license exemptions for residents.
I wanted to stop you at this point. When you say residents, you mean medical residents in training, correct? Not residents of the state per se, but medical residents
Correct.
in training. Great.
So it's also known as postgraduate training, or sometimes it's referred to as the internship year for their first year of training for the medical school graduates. In California, a U.S. and Canadian medical school graduate can train up to 2 years without a license, but any of the training that they received anywhere in the U.S. or Canada is counted towards that, and they must be licensed by the end of their second year. For international medical school graduates, they're also eligible for licensure after 1 year, completing the 1 year. For international medical school graduates, they must complete their 2 years. Again, all the training done within the United States and Canada is counted, and they must be licensed by the end of their third year. The minimum number of years for a ACGME or Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons training for any of the accredited programs is 3 years and up to 7, and that doesn't include any of the fellowships that they may do on top of that, or research years they may include in that. Currently in the U.S., we have 31 states that require only 1 year of training for U.S. Canadian graduates. We have 16 states that require 2 years, and 3 states that require 3 years, and 1 state that requires full program completion. For our international medical school graduates, the requirements are, we have a number of states. For 1 year is 2 states, for 2 years it's 19 states, for 3 years it's 27 states, and 1 state that has full program requirements. In addition, some states also accept non-accredited training for licensure. The Federation of State Medical Boards recommends a minimum of 3 years of accredited ACGME training for licensure. And we've on pages basically starting on page 3 and through 6, or 3 and 4 of your packet information is some of the issues we've identified that we'd like to consider and get input on.
Before we go on and take comments from the public, I just want to say the impetus for this, as Mr. Ward may have alluded to, the practice of medicine clearly has changed significantly since the current code was voted into law in 1980. And I can vaguely remember that even myself when I was training at that time. So there is a significant difference. And since our primary mandate at the medical board here is the protection of the consumers of the state of California, we want to be sure that the requirements of our licensees are still up to date for what is required in practice in the real world. So at this point in time, I believe we'd like to start taking comments from the public for discussion. So I do have one public comment here from Cindy Bowling, Professional Boundaries Incorporated. If you'd like to step up.
Hi, it's under number 3.
Oh, under number 3. Oh. If I could read, I'd be wonderful. Do I? Please, Ms. Kirchmeyer.
So really, as Dr. Bishop said, the impetus of the meeting was really when the board members were looking at the guidelines and the requirements for licensure, and found that it only requires 1 year of postgraduate training, and then from there, a physician literally could stop the postgraduate training program and become licensed. And so this was a concern for the board, and so they had asked the staff to really look into whether we need to change that requirement from 1 year for U.S. and 2 years for international to either 2 years or 3 years requirement for all of the licensure applicants. So that's what we're here to hear, but when we started looking at really changing the law and requiring either 2 or 3 years, there were a lot of items that we said, okay, actually if we do this, this is going to impact other areas. And so the list of issues that are for consideration there, these are some of the things that staff came up with, and also in talking to some of the GME directors and deans, so that these are some of the things that we came up with and with some of their input. But our biggest concern is there's going to be an unintended consequence that we don't think of or that we don't know about, and that's really what we want to hear from you, is if we were to change the requirements to require 3 years of postgraduate training, what would that impact? If there's something on this list that you want to expound on and we want to hear from you regarding that, we would love to hear from you. Or if there's something that isn't here that you believe is an issue, that's what we want to hear. So if there's anybody in the room to kind of hit on that, we'll call you up first. And then once we hear from anybody in the room, then we will go to the phone and hear from anybody on the telephone. And I'm not going to read over those issues, and I think everybody has a copy now of those issues there. But, you know, those are the things that we've identified. But again, we need to hear from you on this. So with that, I'm going to kick it off to anybody to come forward. And if you haven't filled out a speaker slip, that's fine. We can take one at the end, or you can notify us.
Excellent. Ms. Kirchmeyer, you're always so clarifying. Thank you so much. First, we have Anita Goyal. Would you like to step to the front? Welcome and thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi. My name is Anita Goyle. I'd like to thank the board members for allowing me to be here and allowing me to speak. I'm a fourth-year medical student and will be applying for my residency this fall to begin my training in 2016. I would like to express my support for the increase in postgraduate training requirements, and also to express my support of the approval of additional World Medical Directory listed medical schools, as is one of the additional items, I believe on page 3 or 4. I am from Chicago, Illinois, born and raised. I received my undergraduate education from Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. I'm currently an international medical student, having completed my first 2 years of the basic science curriculum in the British West Indies and completed my entire third year in Chicago's teaching hospitals. The majority of my clinical rotations have been alongside the students of the University of Illinois at Chicago, University of Chicago, and Chicago Medical School, along with many faculty from the UIC as well, University of Chicago, and several other teaching attendings at area teaching institutions. My school is not currently on the Medical Board of California's approved list of medical schools, which as it stands precludes me from receiving any training or returning any medical service to the state of California for no less than 12 years from the day I begin my residency. I certainly agree with the board's, I certainly agree with and respect the board's work in ensuring the provision of healthcare to the highest of standards and in protecting both patient and consumer safety. In this regard, I very much agree with a rigorous postgraduate training to ensure adequate training, like you said, for the changing face of medicine since the requirements were first instilled in the 1980s. And I agree with very intense licensing requirements. It is my hope that by standardizing the training across, the training requirements across U.S. and international medical graduates, so that they receive the same components of medical education, so that they are expected to complete the same licensing exams, and they are expected and allowed to complete ACGME-approved residency trainings in multiple locations that both U.S. and international medical graduates will be able to enter California's working medical force and be upheld to the same requirements of training. My hope is that by increasing all of these requirements and allowing more physicians from additionally approved, hopefully approved medical schools that follow the same curriculum and same requirements as those listed on the approved list, that this will serve California well in the changing face and growing face of medicine as we see it today. There are several underserved areas. Underserved medicine is the area in which I hope to practice, and there are several underserved areas in California where the patient-to-physician ratio is somewhere around 1 physician to upwards of 3,000, even 3,500, 4,000 patients, and I certainly hope to be able to return a service in those areas. So I, basically in summary, I would like to support more consideration and more of a look into these additional medical schools, possibly using the interstate licensing compact or just looking at some of the World Medical Directory approved medical schools in allowing more of a physician influx into the state of California, but while maintaining or even increasing the training requirements to ensure that the practice of medicine is at the highest standards of care. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments.
And I just wanted to point out one reason that that was on our list of issues, because our thought is that if we move to a 3-year postgraduate training program where an individual would have had to have gone successfully through 3 years of postgraduate training, our rigorous evaluation and look into the medical schools may not be necessary then at that time, and we would be able to just rely on the list that's already out there under the, I always get the name, the World Directory of Medical Schools. So that's kind of the thought process behind why that's incorporated there, because we don't really believe that if we would have somebody that goes all the way through that high-level review of schools would be necessary then at that point. You know, right now we believe it is because, again, a person can become licensed with only 1 year of postgraduate training. And, you know, it might be easy to get one through 1 year, but it might be a little bit more difficult to get through 3 years, so.
Are there any more comments from the public who are present with respect to this agenda item? All right, seeing none, are there any comments on the phone with respect to this agenda item?
As of now, no.
Okay.
You may.
Good. We are either having great support for this issue, or people didn't know we were having this meeting today. It's unusual for the meetings I've been at so far. Okay, well, let us move on to the next agenda item, which may be more discussion perhaps. An overview and discussion of the minimum requirements for physician reentry to practice after a period of non-practice. And this was something that we wanted to think about because not infrequently we have physicians who, for whatever reason, either voluntarily or involuntarily, they have a period, sometimes extended, of non-practice. And currently, there is, as far as I'm aware of, no restriction to these people coming back into practice as long as their license is in good standing or have completed their rehabilitation during probation. So this raised the question of how long of non-practice before someone should be reevaluated before they're allowed to practice medicine again. It just makes sense. It at least has some face validity to us that you lose your skills. You may be able to read books, but there's more to medicine than just reading books. So at any rate, that's the thought behind this. And Ms. Kirchmeier, did you have any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, just to add a little bit more, this actually was part of our Sunset Review as well, an issue that came up there, because there is a difference between an individual that's actually on probation and an individual that just continues to renew their license. So right now, if a physician just continues to renew their license, there's no question on their renewal application as to whether they're practicing. On the survey, it does put, you put information as to what areas you are in, but there's no real follow-through on that to say that that individual actually has been in the practice and that they're safe to practice for a certain amount of time. This is a big issue, not just for California. This is a nationwide issue, and other states are looking into that. What does reentry mean? What can a physician do in order to come back into practice? What would be required in order to ensure consumer protection? So there's a lot of questions around it. If an individual is on probation right now, there's a requirement that they have to, if they aren't practicing, if they don't practice for 18 months, then they have to go in and do a clinical training program. And so we, as I said, for a licensee who isn't on probation, and again, we understand physicians who are on probation have been found to be in violation of the Medical Practice Act, and so we're trying to make sure that they are educated and that they're getting the information that they need. And so it should be a little bit different. I don't say that it's not, but is there a consumer protection element to the medical board allowing a physician to continue to just renew a license if they're not practicing? And so basically a physician could be out of practice for 10 years and start practicing the very next day without anything that the medical board right now could do about that. Now, a physician, we know with most credentialing agencies and, if you're in a system, I would be willing to bet you're not going to get, hospital privileges and those kind of things without going through training program or beefing up your skills again. But for a solo practitioner or those individuals, they could actually just start a practice and start practicing right off the bat right there. So those are some of the concerns that the board had when looking at reentry, and I know that, like I said, this is a bigger nationwide issue, but we kind of wanted to start the discussion here about what should California do, should we do anything, and what would that look like if we started to look at this. And I know one of the problems that we've seen, I think, even from the Federation of State Medical Boards perspective, is that there aren't a lot of programs out there that do the training needed in order to train these individuals to come back into practice. And so there's some limited programs. We're hearing about some more here in California that are starting to do this, but it would have to be, because we don't license by specialty, it would have to be a broad spectrum, so it would have to cover everything. And so that's kind of the background on why we're doing this.
It's actually interesting you discuss that, because it dawns on me that in this area of maintenance of certification, that we require this, at least the boards require this, yet the state doesn't have anything similarly for people who may or may not be practicing at all, let alone practicing on a day-to-day basis. So with that being said, I do have, at least at this point, one public speaking comment on Cindy Bowling. I got it right this time. Thank you.
And I would like to remind the teleconference participants that it's actually best to listen on your phone rather than the webcast, because there is a delay in the webcast signal.
Hi, I'm Cindy Bowling. I am the Director of Communications and Regulatory Board Liaison for Professional Boundaries, Inc. We provide remedial courses in prescribing, record-keeping, ethics, and boundaries. We are one of the two companies that offers the ethics 22-hour course that's under 1358.1, I believe. We wanted to be here, we wanted to contribute to this discussion because for 15 years we have assisted physicians in returning to practice. Most of them have been either suspended or some revoked. Some have taken sabbaticals and just felt like they needed to come back and get reacquainted with boundaries and ethics and record keeping and prescribing. What we see is they need to, what we believe in and what we see from them is a linear education, point education, fly in, fly out, 2 days, 3 days, and you're done, doesn't cut it. These folks have been through a lot, losing their licenses, not working, paying legal fees. They have so many built-in vulnerabilities that cause them to violate these boundaries because they're trying to meet their own emotional needs. And they can fly in and fly out and they can get the education, but getting them to discuss it, to focus on what it is that's going on in their daily lives that's causing these vulnerabilities, and what in the workplace, their practice, what's a risk factor. Those combined together cause these violations. And so returning them back to practice is not just go attend a course and you're done with it. We believe that there needs to be some form of linear education. And I'm not here to promote my company at all, but just as an example, what we do is we have, after they've attended our courses, we have what we call the maintenance and accountability seminars. They are, some of our California doctors have been in this particular program for more than 6 years, simply because they like it. Others around the nation are in it for extended periods of times. The boards love it. The doctors love it. They say it keeps them safe. It's a call-in conference group in the evening for 1 hour a week for 12 weeks. And they are discussing ethical and boundary dilemma and resolution. They are augmenting their protection plan that they have to create when they go to our courses. And so they're building on this. They're really understanding what it is what causes these vulnerabilities? What are these risk factors? And when they see that, they can identify it and they can stop themselves, put that protection plan, it should already be in place, and continue to practice safely. So we believe that the linear education is a lot more valuable than just a fly-in, fly-out course. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have David Perot, California Hospital Association.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. David Perot. I'm the Senior Vice President, Chief Medical Officer at the California Hospital Association. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about this issue. It does come up in the hospital setting quite often. I don't say quite often, but it does come up when we receive those calls as to what should be done. I also like to have a disclosure that I serve on the Board of Commissioners for the Joint Commission. So, as you know, I'm the accreditation body for many of the organizations in California. Well over 300 of the hospitals are accredited by the Joint Commission. So if you look at CMS conditions of participation, they require that there has to be an assurance of competency of a physician for appointment or reappointment. And under Joint Commission standards, they have OPPE and FPPE processes that are used to assure that competency. But when someone is coming back to a hospital for the first time, in which he or she have been absent from the practice of daily medicine, it does sometimes provide a challenge. There is no set time in the conditions of participation as to time, but in general, most hospitals look at a 2-year rule. In that they will say if someone has had no interactions within the past 2 years, it is generally within their medical staff bylaws or rules and regulations to look at that person with a little greater scrutiny as to ensure competency when they are appointed or happen to be reappointed to the medical staff. The processes the hospitals go through then, they will search out organizations that can provide that ability for a physician to attend some type of curricular activities that would ensure that they could be reemerged back in, and information then relayed back to the hospital in their credentialing process so that they can assure that obviously they're protecting patients and ensure that the person that's being appointed to the medical staff is going to have the adequate competency to obviously receive the appointment. There are programs that are out there. There are several of them. I know Colorado PACE program here in California, and there are others that I know that they have sought out to search. So it is an issue, especially for those that have, and I'm not speaking so much about the well-being physician that has been out for that, but someone who has left practice for some other, they may be pursuing some other business career or whatever happens to be. There are also, we are seeing an increased number of physicians that have retired a little earlier, and then they decided to come back for various reasons. And I think what's important, that whatever we do, it has to be assured that we try to protect the public, but also ensure that we're not losing the training and the skill sets that are out there, that as we begin to have challenges in workforce, that we have an adequate workforce. So I think that's an important part to take in consideration, that it doesn't become so onerous that we can't assure that those quality individuals can be back into the system.
Exactly right. And these folks tend to be marginalized anyway, and to marginalize them more would be a disservice to them and to our state and citizens.
I agree.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next we have Yvonne Chung from the California Medical Association.
Yvonne Chung with the California Medical Association. Thank you for holding the stakeholder meeting. We would echo the comments of the earlier two speakers. We have concerns about setting hard and fast rules about, how many years somebody may be out of practice. I think part of it also is defining what does it mean to be out of practice. Does it mean there are many physicians who are currently in practice but have not directly interacted with a patient in many years? Would you consider them to be out of practice? Many of them hold this is sort of the curse of competency. As you move up within an organization, you just gradually have less and less time for direct patient care. If those physicians decide to go back into patient care, would they be required to participate in some kind of a reentry program? So there's the issue of how you define that. I think that the initial first step for this would be for the medical board and other organizations to provide resources to employers and hospitals, because we don't believe that there is a one-size-fits-all here. It's going to depend a lot on how long they were already in practice, what the circumstances of their leave were. We have a lot of female physicians who take maternity leave, and that's a very common issue. Sometimes they are practicing part-time while they are on leave. I think we want to keep it flexible so that coming back into the physician workforce continues to be attractive. What we have heard from our physicians on some of these reentry programs that their employers ask them to attend, and they are more than willing to attend, is usually the feasibility of actually doing it within their life. So, sometimes it's a cost issue, sometimes it's the length of the program and the intensity. So I think that encouraging the development of different types of programs that fit into different lifestyles, that employers and hospitals can look at, and malpractice carriers can set as their standards, because as we know, there's an existing system of safeguards, and I think it would be better to try to reinforce that system and to create yet another level of hurdles for somebody to come back. And again, I agree with the other speaker. I'm speaking more of the physicians who are not taking a leave because of substance abuse or something like that. But the ones who have just are taking time off to do something else. And as we know with physician burnout, we don't want to preclude that, cut that option off for physicians where they feel like they can't ever take a break because they might never be able to get back into the game. So I think that would be, I think that's how we would want to see the issue move forward, is looking at the different options and how we can make this a reasonable option. And I think if we look at it through the lens of continuing medical education, we see physicians all the time who want to change specialties as well. And as you know, the license is a plenary license. And, is that potentially, if you're, in pediatrics and you want to move into internal medicine, for all intents and purposes, that may look a lot like a reentry, even though you have been in contact with patients providing patient care. So I think there's a lot of combinations here that we need to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no more speaker slips. Are there any speakers from the phone line?
Okay. If there is a question or comment, star and one. Okay, we have no one in queue now.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Ms. Kirchmeier, any comments from your situation?
From my perspective, it is something that's a huge issue. Both of these issues are large because they're going to take legislation to make any type of changes. And that's really why we wanted to have an interested parties meeting, just to start and kick this off, because we need as much input as possible. Both of these really have been identified actually by the board as two issues that we need to look into as far as our role as consumer protection. And so as much input as we can receive on these issues, that's really where we're coming from. And so to that end, we are planning on holding another interested parties meeting, I think probably in August or September, Mr. Warden?
Yeah, probably, most likely
September. We want to, again, open it up more for the schools and to be able to come out too and interact with us. And unfortunately today a lot of orientations were going on. So we knew that coming into it. And so we want to open it up because we want to receive more information on these issues that we've identified. And so we will be holding another interested parties meeting in Southern California. We want to make sure that we reach both areas of the state so we can get as much input as possible on it. So neither of these issues are anything that are going to be quick and easy to go through. And again, without support and without fully fleshing out both of these issues, we're not going to be able to make any changes. So that's kind of where we're coming from.
Mr. Warden, any comments?
anything that might come up in between the two parties, interested parties meetings, you can feel free to either contact me directly by email or telephone and provide that information to me. The identified issues for the postgraduate training, that wasn't all of staff's ideas. So we actually had input from program directors and stuff for that, but we also know that that was a small group of program directors, and we need a bigger group. So we need a bigger picture because we don't know all the consequences. And there are several laws that would probably, statutes that would have to be amended or changed. And then the other thing is there's staff still needs to spend some time looking at how the states who do have longer requirements address some of the issues for licensure or training licenses and some of the big issues about signing death certificates and being able to prescribe. And so we know those are major concerns, and we are looking for some more input on that. As far as physician entry, we were talking about the licensed physicians, but you also heard a little bit about physicians who took breaks for maybe maternity leaves or raising a child or some other reason why they took a break from practice and they didn't maintain a license, and now they're coming back, and how does that affect them? So that's also something that we have to consider in the physician reentry area. So.
Well, as always, what seems very simple on paper when you sit around with a couple people in the office and talk about these things, when you get input from people like yourselves and others, it turns out it's not quite as simple as it initially seemed. We certainly don't want to be precipitous about any decisions. It takes a lot of talk, a lot of discussion. So we welcome additional comments. We really thank you all for coming out today on this terribly hot day. And I guess with that, we will close the meeting, and you have an afternoon available to have some fun. And we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.